Hello, I'm Lucy Fisher, Chief Political Commentator at Times Radio. I'm delighted to be sitting down today with James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary. Welcome.
Hi.
Well, I say welcome. We're actually on the 28th floor of a skyscraper in Manhattan. We're at the UK mission to the UN. And that, of course, James, is because I'm joining you here in New York as you prepare to address the United Nations Security Council on the one-year anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So firstly, explain to us, what is your message to the Security Council going to be?
Well, the message that I'm giving this year on the anniversary is going to be quite similar to the message that we gave the world last year, which is this is an egregious breach, not just of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, but it is an attack on the UN Charter and the very foundation principles that has kept the world relatively safe since the end of the last war. And that we have to support Ukraine. We have to support them until they are successful in ejecting Russia from their land. And we have to make it clear to the world that aggressors cannot be allowed to benefit from that aggression. That very much echoes the words from last year, and that's going to be what I'm going to reinforce in the chamber of the Security Council tomorrow.
And how concerned are you that public opinion in other parts of the Western alliance is beginning to fracture, that other governments aren't quite as foursquare behind Kyiv for the long term, like you say the UK is?
Well, this afternoon there was a vote at the UN General Assembly. 141 countries voted in support of Ukraine and in condemnation of Russia. That's exactly the same number as the vote last year after the full-scale invasion initiated by Vladimir Putin. So here at the UN, the resolve is still very, very strong. We, I think, have to make the case to the world, to our own voters and to other parts of the world, that Vladimir Putin has shown a pattern of behaviour. He keeps being aggressive. He keeps sending troops across borders. He did it in Crimea, he did it in Donbass, he did it in Georgia. And therefore he will not stop until he is stopped. And that's why we have to be in it for the long haul. We made a promise to the Ukrainians. We promised them that we would support them and we would defend the UN Charter. We have got to be good to that promise. And we've got to send the message that our commitment to their security and the UN Charter is not time limited.
So obviously their core aim, ask at the moment, is to get fast jets from the West. Any update you can give us on Ben Wallace's review into looking at the UK giving Typhoons, which the PM asked him to have a look at?
Well, I'm going to let Ben do what he does best, which is the assessment of our military support. My job, working obviously for the Prime Minister and hand in hand with Ben Wallace, is making sure that our military defensive support to Ukraine and our lobbying for others to support goes hand in hand with our diplomatic efforts. Ben and I have unsurprisingly been working very, very closely since I was appointed to this role. And I'm very, very proud of the fact that in conjunction with a lot of our allies in NATO and further afield, we've been instrumental in training Ukrainian troops. We've made a commitment to train Ukrainian fast jet pilots and Ukrainian Marines. So we will keep working with our friends and colleagues and allies around the world in giving Ukraine the equipment that will help them win, and also giving their people the training they need to turn them into a really effective professional army, which is pushing back Putin's forces in many, many parts of Ukraine.
And let's just talk a bit about the threat from Russia, not just to Ukraine, but the wider West. I know you've been really hot on warning that Russia is undertaking cyber attacks, poisonous disinformation campaigns, you call it. I wanted to ask you about the nuclear threat. That's a lever we haven't heard much from Putin about lately. I know, of course, Russia has withdrawn from the New START treaty this week, but they've said that they will keep the current cap on warheads. Should we be braced for him to bring the N-word back into the discussion here?
So this is a really important point, a really important question that you just asked. The point that I've been making in the conversations that I've had with my interlocutors around the world is that we have committed to ensure that Putin fails in his attempt to invade Ukraine. And as that realization of his failure dawns on him, he will use every trick in the book. He will use cyber. He will use disinformation. He will try and call in any and every favour in the international community that he can. He will threaten escalation, and he will probably threaten nuclear use. And what we have to say to the Russian people is that there is not and has never been a threat to Russia itself. This is a purely defensive posture. No one else is talking about this kind of escalation, and there is no threat to Russia itself. That's the first point. But the international community also has to understand that this escalatory language is a signal that he is unsuccessful. It is an inevitable prelude to what we're all trying to achieve, which is his failure on the battlefield in Ukraine. So we have to expect this, and when it comes, we have to mitigate it, we have to deal with it. But we mustn't allow ourselves to be deterred from doing the right thing, which is defending Ukraine and defending the UN Charter, defending the principles that have kept us safe since the end of the Second World War.
Well, it's quite a stark warning that you think Russia probably will resort to threatening to use nuclear weapons. Is it just rhetoric? Is it a bluff? Or do you think we should be primed for Putin actually going through with that?
Well, what I would say is that earlier when we had similar threats from Russia, we made it very clear, and I think the international community made it very, very clear that that there is, as I say, no threat to the Russian homeland. There is no justification for escalatory rhetoric in whatever form, and that what we want to see is Ukraine successful in its self-defense. That is what we're focused on. That is all we are focused on, is defending Ukraine, defending the UN Charter. It is not about a threat to Russia itself, and therefore there is no justification for any form of escalatory language coming out of Putin or Moscow.
Okay, well, I'm going to read from that. You think it might just be language, but very worrying nonetheless. Now, your US counterpart, Antony Blinken, has spoken in recent days about US intelligence suggesting China could be about to give weapons to Russia. Is that your understanding too?
Well, obviously, we work very closely with the United States of America. We regularly discuss the issues. In fact, I was with Tony Blinken in Munich just at the tail end of last week, where we discussed the progress of this conflict and our support. So, of course, we take very, very seriously any concerns that the United States of America raises. I mean, my observation is that I think it would be a huge error of judgment for any country to provide military support to Russia. I think Russia's behaviour has made it a pariah on the world stage. We saw from the vote earlier today that the world is united in condemnation. 141 countries united in condemnation of Russia's actions. And I can't see why any country in the world would want to import that bad will, would want to import that reputational damage. And what I would say to any and every country that maintains a diplomatic relationship with the Russian government, the Russian state, is to advise them to stop this. It is in Putin's gift to bring this war to a conclusion now by withdrawing his troops, by stopping this aggression, by stopping the attacks. And the message that I would send to all countries is impress upon Putin the futility of his actions and the importance of withdrawing his troops.
And is that a request particularly for China, where we know President Xi has some influence with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I would say that was a message I would send to any and every country that still has any influence at all with Moscow. This is hugely damaging. It's cost thousands of lives of Ukrainians. It's causing huge damage in Ukraine. But we should also recognise, and I think the leadership in Russia should recognise, that the cost of Russian lives is also huge. There are Russian families whose sons went off to what they were told was a training exercise in Belarus, and those Russian soldiers have never come home. the front line in the battlefield of Ukraine, Russia has been losing up to 800 soldiers a day killed in the front line. This is immoral, it is unsustainable, and it is a stain on Russia's reputation on the international stage. And as I say, it could stop. It could stop today if Putin were to cease his aggression and withdraw his troops. But it has to stop in a way that respects the territorial integrity of Ukraine, respects their sovereignty, and as I say, respects what we're here to protect, is the UN Charter, which has kept the world safe for so many decades.
Let's just turn for a moment to Iran. We know, of course, Tehran has been supplying deadly drones and other lethal weaponry to Moscow. How worried are you about Iran? And not just in the context of the Ukraine war, but equally, I was at a briefing a few months ago with MI5 when they talked about 8 plots involving assassinations on UK soil by Iran.
Well, we saw reports just at the tail end of last week that through the incredibly professional work of our security services and police forces, we foiled a number of attempts by Iranian operatives in the UK. And as I say, I pay huge tribute to our police and security services for foiling those attempts to do us harm. Of course, Iran should cease this kind of disruptive behaviour, both here in the UK and in other parts of the world. It should stop sending military equipment to Russia, and of course we have sanctioned both companies and individuals who have been involved in that, and it should stop its destabilising activity in the region. Iran is a country with a huge repository of art and culture. It was a hotbed of science and development for many, many, many centuries. And yet that history is being tarnished by the actions of the leadership of Iran. They're brutalizing their own people. So, of course, we work closely with our friends internationally to try and get Iran to behave better, not to pursue its nuclear weapons aspirations, which I think would be a terrible error of judgment there. And of course, in doing so, also look to keep British people safe, whether they be here in the UK or in Iran or in the region.
Is Iran's behaviour getting worse?
Well, sadly it is. It is getting worse.
And is it getting worse also specifically with regard to the UK?
Well, as I say, the reports that we saw over the weekend from our security services have shown there have been regular attempts to perpetrate harmful activity here in the UK. There has been, as I say, a significant number of attempts there. We see the brutalization from the Iranian leadership against women, those incredibly brave Iranian women who are asking nothing more than just to be able to live their lives in dignity and freedom. And I would, and I've said this directly to representatives of the Iranian government, that this is a self-defeating set of actions. It is not in Iran's interest to pursue these damaging courses of events. They could and should take a different track. They could and should have a much healthier relationship on the world stage. And we will, of course, always take action in response to their behaviours, where their behaviours are inappropriate, whether it be through sanctions, whether it be through coordinated actions with our international partners.
It does feel like the world is getting more dangerous. And I know Ben Wallace said in the past day or so, and I quote, "Conflict is coming by the end of this decade. Whether it is a cold war or hot, war is coming." Do you agree with that?
Well, the world is demonstrably a more dangerous place than it was, say, when I was first elected back in 2015. We have a major armoured conflict in Europe. We have the Wagner Group active in a number of parts of Africa. We see, as I say, the very, very damaging behaviour that Iran has in the Middle East and elsewhere. And of course, we are regularly assailed by cyber attacks.
So are we already in a Cold War?
Well, we are in a dangerous environment. There's no doubt about that. I think the Prime Minister is absolutely right when he talks about his commitment to not just our own domestic peace and security, but our contribution on the world stage. I think we've been recognised. As I say, I just came back from the Munich Security Conference, and the tone of that conference was that the Brits are back. We are very much active on the world stage. We are very much playing our part. We have been seen to take the lead on a number of really important international issues, obviously the situation in Ukraine being one of the most high profile of them. And the Prime Minister is absolutely right that if we want to keep the world safe, we have to be active, we have to be proactive with our friends and allies in pursuing that aim. That's the commitment he's made, and he's absolutely right to make that commitment.
Now, Foreign Secretary, I know aside from concentrating on Ukraine, obviously this week you've been locked in intensive talks with your EU chief negotiator, Maros Šefčovič. I know you're not going to get into the detail of the deal, but let me try and pin you down on a broader point of principle, which is, do the DUP effectively have a veto over this deal, or is there a scenario in which the UK government, could push ahead with it without their support?
Well, the Prime Minister's questions just this week made his priorities absolutely clear. He is a unionist. He is a Brexiteer, and he, of course, wants to see the institutions of Northern Ireland, those institutions created by the Good Friday Agreement, back up and running. Those are his motivations. We recognise that the protocol is causing, the implementation of the protocol is causing real problems, real world problems in Northern Ireland. When I went over there a couple of months ago...
Forgive me, I don't think anyone disputes that. But if you come forward with a deal which the UK government thinks solves some of those problems on a technical basis, addresses some of the DUP's concerns, but the DUP refuses to back it, could the UK government still press ahead with it? So
what the DUP have said, and what other unionist politicians have said in Northern Ireland, and what people I've spoken to on my visits to Northern Ireland have all said, is that their place in the UK is incredibly important, and we completely agree with them on that. The sovereignty is important. We completely agree with them on that. That their democratic institutions have got to be in the forefront of decision making that affects the people of Northern Ireland, as you would expect any political institutions to do, and we agree with them on that. So the things they're concerned about and the things that we're concerned about are absolutely in alignment, and we are focused on resolving all the issues that need resolving. Some of them are technical trade issues and very, very complicated, and some of them are really simple but important principles, like Northern Ireland's place as an integral part of the United Kingdom, that sense of sovereignty, that the importance of a democratic voice. So when hopefully we get those issues resolved, then I would hope that the DUP would recognise that we've addressed their concerns, and until we have addressed those core concerns, we're not going to sign off on a deal. And I know there's been lots of speculation.
Okay, so that's a straight answer then. You're not going to press ahead with a deal that isn't backed by the DUP.
No, what I've said is we've got to make sure that the issues that they've highlighted are addressed, and these are the same issues that we feel strongly about. And the Prime Minister's made the point rather, at the dispatch box and in a number of conversations that he has had publicly, that the concerns that they've addressed, not just about the technical elements, but about those elements of sovereignty, place within the United Kingdom, those are just as important to us as they are to the unionist political representatives in Northern Ireland. And that is at the heart, and always has been, at the heart of our negotiating position.
Okay, so that sounds like there could potentially be a scenario in which the government presses ahead without DUP support. Now, you have been at the centre of negotiations. Do you feel any sense of regret for not bringing the DUP and the ERG in on where you were landing with this deal sooner, as some of your colleagues like Jacob Rees-Mogg have said the government should have done?
So, obviously, Jacob good friend and a fantastic colleague, and I completely understand the point he has made. But of course, I've seen since 2016 the various attempts at successfully negotiating our departure from the EU and our future relationship with the EU. And what I've very much taken from that is giving a running commentary before or during the process has not been a successful way forward. And I know that causes frustration, and some people who feel and indeed do have very, very valid opinions that they want to give may feel a bit frustrated by that process. But of course, we always listen to the concerns that our colleagues raise. We always listen to the concerns raised by the people of Northern Ireland, both political and businesses in Northern Ireland. And we make sure, as I've said, that we listen to those concerns and we're conscious of those concerns as we take the negotiations forward. But as I say, giving a running commentary, talking about parts of an agreement out of context with other parts of the agreement, I don't think is a workable way forward. But Rishi was a Brexiteer. I came out for Brexit back before it was cool. Chris Heaton-Harris, the Northern Ireland Secretary, was the head of the ERG for many years. So Brexiters are at the heart of this process. Unionists are at the heart of this process. Conservatives are at the heart of this process. And we are absolutely determined to make sure that whatever deal, if we can get to a deal, it will be because we have addressed the issues that have been raised with us by people who feel passionate about this, because we feel passionate about this.
And just finally, for now, Boris Johnson, another good friend of yours, has come out publicly and said that Rishi Sunak has to go through with the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill currently on ice. Is he right?
Well, the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill is there for a reason. I think that the Prime Minister was the then Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was absolutely right to initiate that process. We've always said that the issues around the protocol need to be resolved, whether it be through the bill or through negotiation. And we've always said that our preferred option was the negotiated route. But the bill was there for a reason. These issues have got to be resolved. As I say, I hope that those things can be resolved through negotiation, but ultimately the bill is there for a reason.
And it should be used if there can't be negotiated.
Well, as I say, the issues have to be resolved. Mm-hmm. Our preference is to resolve them through negotiations.
So you think Boris Johnson has a legitimate view here, and he's not just trying to use this to wreak revenge on Rishi Sunak, as some people are speculating?
Well, look, there will always be people that speculate about the motives of all politicians. I mean, that is the background music to any political career. Boris Johnson, when he was Prime Minister, obviously did a huge amount of work. I was his party chairman as we went through the 2019 general election, and as we actually delivered Brexit when we left the European Union, he was our Prime Minister. We would not be where we are today without the work that he put in, and indeed without the work that Liz put in when she was Prime Minister. So everything we're doing is building on the work of our predecessors, and I think we should always hold that in our heads. And ultimately, of course, what we want to do is complete the last bit of the jigsaw puzzle of our departure from the European Union, which is to make sure that the UK is intact, meaningfully intact, that Northern Ireland is just as, and I've always said, Northern Ireland is just as much a part of the UK as my North Essex constituency is, and that has to be meaningful, and that means that seed potatoes from Wolverhampton can be sold in the garden centre that I visited in Northern Ireland. That the democratic institutions of Northern Ireland are back up and running, that the people of Northern Ireland can enjoy all the benefits of being part of the United Kingdom as everyone else in the United Kingdom. This is at the heart of what we're doing, building on the work of our predecessors. And as I say, what I'm genuinely hoping for is we can get this resolved, we can get this resolved quickly, and we can get it resolved successfully.
Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, thank you. for joining Times Radio, and I will be joining you and catching up with you again tomorrow as you speak to the UN.
Thank you very much.